Hello there, folks. I'm here in our backyard, and today I want to talk about zone pushing because I feel like it's something that obviously people talk about a lot, and I feel like sometimes people misunderstand it and people have a lot of questions about it. And I just sort of wanted to go through it because recently, a few months ago really, but I was reading this thread on Palm Talk that someone wrote saying you can't zone push. There's no such thing as zone pushing. You know, if a palm is from a tropical climate, if a palm wants to grow in a tropical climate, it will only grow in a tropical climate. You know, if a palm is not hardy in a certain zone, it's just not going to grow there. And I read through all the discussions about it, and I just was thinking about it recently, and I reread through a lot of people's posts. Palm Talk's a great palm resource, by the way. You guys should go on there. It's a great source. But I was reading through people's posts there, and it was really interesting to see people's responses, because obviously most people were of the mind that zone pushing obviously is possible. That's how I feel, and I think that zone pushing is a real thing, and it's not just made up. And I'm going to go through it today. But the person was, it was interesting to hear, because they were just, as I said, saying that a tropical palm wants to grow in a tropical climate, and you can, and you plant it in a cooler climate, it's just not going to grow there if it doesn't want to grow there. And obviously, if you tried a coconut palm here and you plant it in the ground, it wouldn't survive the winter, no matter what kind of spot you put it in. You need to box it in, and that's a separate issue, the whole protection and boxing palms in. And I love that, and I'm all for that. And people do that in colder climates where palms just won't grow, or where certain palm species won't grow. And that's a whole separate thing. Boxing palms in and creating an artificial environment or adding heat. That's, I don't think that's generally considered zone pushing. That's just growing hardy palms, which I think is awesome. But this is specifically about growing palms, I guess you'd say unprotected, without heat, usually without wrapping, in generally speaking, climates where they don't grow. And you may think, well, how is that possible? When you really think about it, if a palm, simply won't grow in a climate, it's just not going to grow there. But that's not entirely true. And people were made the really good point that it's not all black and white, and it's not. There's a lot of complexities to it. The first part that I want to get to is the whole notion of zones themselves, which is very, it's very complex, very complicated, because first of all, here in the United States, obviously it's a huge country, so the East Coast versus the West Coast and everywhere in between, the zones, especially on the East Coast versus the West Coast, are very different. A zone 10B in California versus a zone 10B in Florida are totally different things. A zone 10B in California, you're obviously going to have a lot of difficulty growing a coconut palm. A zone 10B in Florida, they're going to be all over, and you can, probably zone push with, even lipstick palms and all these less hardy species that you just can't grow in California. And I'll get to what that means in a second. But the whole designation of zones is very complicated. So if, for example, a palm is listed on most sources as hardy to say zone 8B or something, and you were able to grow it in a zone 8A, it doesn't necessarily mean you're zone pushing. It could just be that the data is incorrect, and also it could just be that the zones are different, because a lot about what determines a zone is very complicated. Albuquerque, New Mexico, I like to use that example a lot because it's the same zone as here. Parts of it are 7B, parts of it are even like into zone 6 of the metro area, but I heard it as like the largest or second largest urban heat island in the country. So that's another factor that I'm going to get to about zone pushing. But that's all to say that it gets as colder here in winter, colder there in winter than it does here, but it's a dry cold. So that enables Washingtonia mellifera. You got like 30-40 foot Washingtonia there, completely unprotected, whereas here they don't stand a chance. And if it's just as cold, you may be thinking, well, how is that possible? It's because it's dry. They don't like winter humidity, winter moisture in the air, winter rain, so they can take a dry cold. So dry versus wet climates is very different. A palm that won't grow in zone 8 in, say, a wet climate that will grow in zone 8 or zone 7 in a dry climate doesn't necessarily mean you're zone pushing, just because it's grown in a zone that it won't grow in a certain kind of zone 8, if that makes sense. And also, climate zones shift all the time. We have periods of warming, now we have obviously global warming, climate change. Zones are shifting a lot. And, DC is certainly getting warmer. We've experienced it. Growing palms here is just not the same as growing 30 years ago. It's better for us, but obviously what it means for the planet is, everything's warming. And, it's just interesting to watch. And, obviously sad, but the zones are shifting, and every 10 years there's something. I mean, I don't know how often it is, but the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, which puts out the zone maps, they do updates every so often. So DC right now is listed as a borderline zone 7A, 7B city. Parts of the city in the northern end are more 7A, so we're more of like a 7A, like a warm 7A, and then the parts by the National Mall, that's like a more 7B down by the river at sea level. We're about 380 feet up here. Anyways, that's all to say that zones aren't concrete. Palms don't know zones. It's not like a palm, if it's told it won't grow in zone 7, it won't grow there. No, I mean, palms don't know zones, and a place listed as zone 7 may not be zone 7 at all, because either it's labeled incorrectly, people have the data wrong. A lot of it depends on where a palm will grow, depends on, duration of cold and stuff. Zones are just labeled differently everywhere. But to the actual zone pushing point, for those of you wondering, okay, zones are complicated, but what about actually growing a palm? Disregarding zones, and maybe zone pushing isn't even the right term, but I mean, it works, but it's more just like climate pushing almost, because if it doesn't matter what a zone is labeled as, you can have places where temperatures generally are too cold to grow palms long term, and you can have palms grow long term there. And the reason for that has a lot to do with location, location. I'm zone pushing right here in my backyard. Take Trachycarpus fortuna. I wish I was in front of one of those examples of those huge trackies, like that huge one in front of that townhouse in DC, because that's a perfect example of a zone pushed windmill palm. It survived 2014 polar vortex, which killed, I don't know the percentage, but the majority of windmill palms in the area were killed by that, unprotected. And yet there were windmill palms that survived that because they were in a good location. So I wish I was there and I could show you an example of zone push palms. None of my palms have exactly been zone pushed yet. But I mean, a lot of them, it's a little tracky for all I know. A lot of it had to do with the location of how it came back. It got spear pull, now it's recovering nicely. A lot of that has to do with the location. So a south-facing wall, for example, that's the best location. This is a south-facing wall, but it's a south-facing fence, so it's not as good. It doesn't provide insulation. But a south-facing wall, what it does is it provides wind protection, which is a huge deal. That's what people don't realize. A lot of zone pushing has to do with wind. If you have a palm in an exposed spot, not only is it going to get super beat up for the wind, no matter what the temperature is, but wind chill, what people don't realize, wind chill can be up to like 20 degrees colder in a windy spot versus a calm spot. So wind chill is a huge deal. And obviously wind chill isn't something that applies over a huge area. It varies from location to location. If you're in the woods, the wind chill might be less than in an open field. Just the same as if a palm is planted out in the middle of your yard, it might even be, several degrees colder than if it's up against a south-facing wall. And if you have like a serious wind chill, that can make all the difference. Literally 1 degree can make all the difference. That's what people don't realize, is that a south-facing wall just by itself is going to provide some heat. You can have insulation from the building, you have wind protection. A matter of just 1 or 2 degrees can make all the difference. And that is zone pushing. That is zone pushing, is being able to grow a palm. It's still unprotected, it's still growing outside, but that south-facing wall provides wind protection. And now some people are going to say, well, it can provide heat, and heat's not really natural. Okay, but I mean, if you could plant a palm in a forest and it could grow better than, no one's really planting palms in forests here, but except for me when I scatter the seeds around. But planting a palm in a forest versus planting in a field, I'm using that example again. Just having a canopy over it can make a lot of difference. If it's planted, like I plant a palm next to this tree, and it's more sensitive to moisture, the tree can block out some of the moisture. I get that's not going to make a huge deal here, but having a canopy over it provides wind protection, makes a lot of the difference. Planting it in a corner, so shelter spots are make a lot of the difference. And yeah, a lot of it has to do with care. How do you care for your palms? Care not necessarily meaning boxing them in. That's not really zone pushing. That's different. But, you care for your palms by, fertilizing them, for example. That can make a lot of difference. When you fertilize your palms in the warm months, it can have a huge impact on how they do in winter. And if they're unhealthy going into winter and then they die, it's not always from cold. The cold might be what kills them, but, they can have pre-existing issues. So care has a lot to do with it. Location has a lot to do with it. And what people don't realize about zone pushing is that, it's possible in all sorts of climates. And, obviously people always go to the example of, well, if you're in Anchorage, Alaska, or even here, you can't grow, you're never going to be able to grow a coconut palm. Yeah, zone pushing doesn't mean growing zone 10 palm, zone 9, zone 10 palm in zone 6 or 7. But it means, you know, you can get a palm that, you know, and again, I'm just talking about standard zones. I'm not talking about what zone DC is labeled as, but a standard palm that will generally not grow in like exposed spots in zone, say zone 7B. You can get it to grow in zone 7A. So you can push something up as a half zone or even a full zone based on its location. You know, sable palmetto has been grown here for many years. I have a few seedlings in the ground over here. These haven't survived any winters yet. But, you know, these can be grown for many years here in a sheltered spot. And, you know, that makes a lot of the difference. It's just interesting to see because people have all sorts of different opinions on zone pushing. My opinion, and I mean, I think generally accepted view is that, you know, zone pushing is real. It's something, and a lot of it just has to do with where your palms are planted, where your exotic plants are planted. It's not just palms, it applies to all sorts of exotic plants. Excuse me, in all sorts of climates. I mean, you can zone push with stuff in zone 5, zone 4. It doesn't necessarily mean you're zone pushing with palms, but there are plenty of plants that'll only grow into zone 5, and you could grow them in zone 4B in a sheltered spot, or a plant that will only grow in zone 10 and you usually grow it in zone 9B in a sheltered spot. You know, a lot of I like to use California because California is a great example of zone pushing. You know, California coconut palms. And by the way, I don't know if you guys know about this, coconut palms don't generally grow in California. There are a few examples. I have 2 videos of some gorgeous ones in California. There's one in Corona, unfortunately. It was a beautiful one in Corona, the town of Corona, California. Absolutely magnificent coconut palm, just chopped down. Very sad. It was not suffering at all. It was incredibly healthy. And again, this is the second example. There's a huge one that actually fruited, the only fruiting example in Palm Desert, that was also chopped down. So now 2 of these, again, literally less than 10 mature coconuts in the entire state that I'm aware of, that were chopped down, 2 of them just because people don't realize their value. There's just another palm tree and people chop down palm trees all the time. But, you know, that said, they're very possible to grow in Southern California. People say they're not. People say they're not around. You know, people have failures all the time. And then you go down a street and you see one like the one in, I mean, I have one in one in Santa Ana. I think it's not like the biggest one, but it looks fantastic. I think it's the best example that I've seen because I've only seen 2. And it's just a gorgeous coconut palm, curved trunk, looks like something right out of the tropics. And it's being grown perfectly because it's under the canopy. I think there's a Norfolk Island pine and something else growing above it. So that provides protection it provides protection from the intense summer heat, which again, they don't mind as much, but mostly it's also like in winter, those brutal Santa Ana winds, that canopy protects from those Santa Ana winds. I don't know what month the Santa Ana winds are, I think, but you know, whatever the winds are in winter in Southern California, that canopy provides protection. Almost all successful California coconut palms are grown up against a south-facing wall or some sort of wall of the house, which provides insulation. A courtyard, for example, even it doesn't even need to be a sheltered spot. You know, even a non-sheltered spot like the one in La Quinta, California, that's a very exposed coconut palm. But it's grown in like a courtyard with like a bunch of stones, and those stones really absorb the heat, and that heat, it gets radiated back at that palm, and it really benefits it. So it's all about the location. It's all about what you how you care for your palm. And yeah, I mean, people don't believe it at first that zone pushing is really possible, but you know, you'd be amazed that 30-foot trachea that I have a video of, nearly 30 foot, in front of that townhome in DC. You know, I feel like 10 years ago, after the 2014 polar vortex, no one would have believed that probably. You know, it's just that's trachea killing winter, but situated in a good location, they can actually survive that. And obviously a lot of it depends on the ecotype. You can zone push by, you know, breeding something like Trachycarpus fortunei Bulgaria, which is the Bulgarian strain of Trachycarpus fortunei, which is hardier, so you can have hardier strains. That's not exactly zone pushing in and of itself. If a strain's already hardier, then obviously it's going to be hardier. Just growing it in a colder zone doesn't necessarily make it zone pushing. But, you know, I mean, certainly you'll have better success with more hardy varieties. But yeah, I say go zone push. And yeah, places like, you know, like I say, you know, there's never, I mean, unless you're in like the true warmest climate on Earth or the true coldest climate on Earth, there's just about anywhere in the world you can zone push with something. There's always gonna be something that's super tender that you can even zone push with in places like Miami. There's always gonna be something that's super hardy that you can zone push with in, you know, like subarctic zones. Obviously most of us are in the middle somewhere, here in the DC area, here in zone 7, zone 6, like Cincinnati. So many things, so many different plants you could zone push with. But yeah, that's my advice is, put it in a good location. And yeah, I want to get your guys' thoughts on that, because I think zone pushing is a very interesting concept, and it's something that a lot of people talk about. And you know, I mean, I think at its core, it's just growing palms in situations that they're not used to. But obviously there's an element of cold in that. You know, you can grow a coconut out in the desert, but if it's a warm desert, that's not zone pushing. It's not just growing palms in, you know, crazy places that you wouldn't normally find them, like Trichocereus fortunei in Switzerland. They're hardy there. It has to do with in the cold, and how you get them through those cold winters. Even by being situated in a better part of your yard, they can withstand temperatures and winters that they wouldn't normally be able to withstand in unprotected sites. So yeah, that's my thoughts, and I want to get your guys, and I appreciate all you guys watching, liking, and subscribing. Hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, a little bit about zone pushing. Gonna get a shot of my Trichocereus fortunei. This thing hasn't actually been zone pushed much yet, but yeah, zone pushing to come from this one. I'm looking forward to that, because yeah, it hasn't been through any winters yet, but let's put it to the test this winter and see how it does. This is a good spot for it on a south facing fence. Definitely got some wind protection. So yeah, take care, folks. Have a good one.